So, Rena, what do you think makes something real?
What?
I'm
not a scientist at all.
Right. What do you think is your definition of sustainability?
Doing things that will not have a negative impact on the environment, and like being more aware of what your impact is on the environment. However, I think academia needs to do is not just research, but needs to actually do the work. Okay, so data is, when you're going out in the field and you're kind of seeing what is actually happening and writing down numbers in terms of what's actually happening to the climate or maybe a river or whatever. And then research is you're analyzing that data. I used to be an environmentalist and used to lead like environmental group. And when I was in college, I entered an organization to try to, do the same kind of work I was doing before. And I found that the research actually limited my ability to help the environment because you get stuck in the numbers rather than actually doing things to fix the environment. Does that make any sense?
Well,
and a lot of times that's my problem with. Sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but a lot of times that's my problem with academia. That they'll write these papers, but they won't actually go into the communities and fix the things, or have plans to like, let's fix this. This is how we're going to fix it, rather than let's just research what's happening here. I don't care about the research of this, whatever. I want you to fix it.
I think if we all want to work across our disciplinary boundaries, we need to think about our own answers to questions like these. How do I know what I think I know? How can I discover something that is true or real? And what is the effect of my claim to have created new knowledge on other people? And how do I navigate power dynamics when sharing this information with others? I'm outlining sort of some broad areas of epistemological thinking that are common to our different areas of study. So natural scientists are typically trained and socialized in what social science and humanities researchers identify as post-positivist inquiry. That is, one based on deterministic assumptions in which causes probably determine effects or outcomes, as Cresswell said. Investigation in the so-called hard sciences seeks to control and remove bias in order to investigate relationships between specific variables. Some social scientists also use positivist and post-positivist research approaches, such as psychology and economics, where quantitative methods and experimental design are heavily promoted as the gold standard. The real difference between positivism and post-positivism is that post-positivists are using some similar forms of data collection and analysis, but are more likely to acknowledge that what is considered to be real and true right now in this moment has the potential to change, because we have examples like quantum physics where huge paradigm shifts have happened in a particular field, and that can really change the way people go about further inquiry in that area. Qualitative researchers in the social sciences, on the other hand, consider individual positionality and social location to be an intrinsic part of research. This empirical assumption that objectivity can be attained, at least to some extent, is one rejected by those who adopt more constructivist, interpretivist, and critical frameworks. Not all social scientists are radical postmodernists who believe reality is entirely tied to an individual's perception, but they are heavily influenced by relativist assumptions about the influence of context and background and attend to difference in human perception. Pragmatism is sometimes described as a quote-unquote middle ground between purist epistemological stances, with its focus on finding what works for the task at hand.
Scientific research.
Scientific research is based on understanding what's happening in the physical world, right? And if we can't understand what's happening in the physical world, how are we supposed to fix it? You can't fix anything that you don't understand, right? And so all this scientific research is promoting our understanding of how the actual physical world works. And so we have to ask questions about that physical world and then address and answer those questions based on the tools that we actually have. And that's research.
Very generally a way of finding something out. So depending on what it is you want to find out, depends on what your approach is going to be. So research could take a number of different forms. If you're a historian, you might go to archives or library or look for artifacts. A social scientist might go interview people. But as a scientist, for me, research takes like a particular kind of form. So here, like, you would have a kind of mode of inquiry where you collect data, some kind of observation maybe, or it could be an experiment. So where theoretically anybody with the right kinds of resources would be able to reproduce this. You could look for instance, gene expression patterns in a plant that's subjected to a number of different conditions, say an experimental condition or maybe multiple, and a control, and maybe a before and an after condition, and then compare the results in order to come to some kind of conclusion about how something works or what something does. So in order for that conclusion to hold up, further experiments should be consistent with those findings. And ideally, the questions should be tackled from multiple directions by multiple different people to feel like you have a robust result. So the other kind of scientific sorts of research might be more observational. So here you're still collecting data, you're still, maybe you're looking at behavior of, I don't know, giraffes in the savannah. Or maybe you're looking at climate data as they're coming in and year after year, and you're revising models and improving them for future projections. So part of, I think, the power of scientific research is that anybody can do it. That's part of something that is a way of looking at the world and investigating it. And it's like you don't have to just wonder about something. If it's a question that fits with the scientific method, then you could find out. And I think that kind of like personal agency is really powerful. As living organisms, humans use energy, and humans are by nature consumers. We're consuming resources, we're not photosynthesizing, and we're just consuming resources just by being alive. So no matter how small your personal footprint on the world is, you're still consuming something. And if we want to keep living, then we need to keep consuming. So sustainability to me is a system of consumption. So from a purely anthropocentric kind of view, with an interest in human life and the quality of human life on Earth, regardless of how much we value other life forms on the planet, even if you don't care about any of those things on a personal level, regardless, then we still want to live sustainably or build a system that is sustainable. So for me, sustainability is like having an adaptive system of consumption that can be continued like for the foreseeable future.
Anthropology is a discipline that grapples with understanding why people see the world the way that they do. And so there's this deep understanding within anthropology that humans have a tremendous amount of variety and creativity in how we relate to the material world around us. And the cultures that we grow up in really give us those like rules and tools for how you're supposed to relate to each other and how you're supposed to relate to the environment and all that kind of stuff. it really has to do with an ecological understanding of how things that seem separate are actually connected to each other. It's the idea that everything is part of the same system through one pathway or another, and in order to be responsible for how we use and live within this system, we should be developing a better and better awareness of how this connects to this over here. And to be sustainable, we need to take steps to minimize the negative effects. And when we are having negative effects, account for those in some way.
I have been trained as an applied social scientist in the field of education, where we really are not purists. I mean, some people are, but in general, the sort of umbrella field of education is not a pure area of research in itself, but rather one that borrows from other epistemological standpoints and employs a lot of different methods to answer questions of interest. So my understanding of the definition of research is a systematic form of inquiry, and that could take a lot of different modes. It could take a lot of different, could look different in a lot of ways. So depending on what the question is that you're trying to answer, you're going to employ different methodologies. So the way I've been trained to think about research is that the way you go about answering your question, like the types of methods you use and ways you collect data and analyze it, should always be driven by the question you're asking in the first place, not that you're trained in a particular form of data collection and analysis and then you apply that to different areas of study. Well, it really depends. So some people in education use pretty traditional quantitative modes of analysis that would be considered sort of the gold standard experimental design. So you might be trying an intervention like designing a new form of reading curriculum, and you want to know if it helps kindergartners and first graders learn how to read better. So you might actually try to set up something like a double-blind study where you've got some people that know they're using the new curriculum and some people that don't, and you're looking for test scores as a measure of achievement, for example. So you might actually be trying to control a lot of variables and looking for statistical measures of relationship. But you could also be doing something completely different and have it be very open-ended and exploratory inquiry. So you might be doing research that's based on narrative inquiry, where it really is about people telling their stories, and you are drawing some conclusions and finding important themes that others could learn from out of a small sample of stories. So it really runs the gamut from really open-ended qualitative to really sort of traditional types of quantitative analysis, and then kind of everything in between. So you might be doing stuff with really big data sets or stuff with one person. Most of my research is qualitative in nature, but because I study policy, I'm really interested in the so what. So it's not, to me, just about how you're doing research, but what is the purpose of the question you're trying to answer. So I would say, I mean, I've been thinking about this question in relation to this project, like with the Knowledge Action Network, and what's the point in sort of, you know, why does it matter that we bridge epistemological divides? And I think the why is because there are different definitions of research that exist, and instead of fighting over what data are more important, we have to be able to speak across our different forms of data, because we're all interested in a collective goal, which would be to limit the negative impacts of climate change caused by humans on the planet. And as educators, it's to be able to reach as wide a range of students as possible to engage them in activities that will have a positive impact on our community. So we have to be able to work interdisciplinarily. So I think that pragmatism as sort of a guiding principle is useful in this way, even though at other times my research is really informed by critical theory or by more postmodern approaches. So for me, it's not that I would say my entire life is driven by pragmatism, but I would say this endeavor of trying to work together across disciplines to address sustainability goals would really benefit from having some sort of shared assumptions that we should look at what we have, think about what our goals are, and then work together to make the most of what we've got. Critical theory is a epistemological standpoint that takes as an ontological assumption that inequality is a reality. So it's assuming that power is out of balance and that certain people have more power than others. And so when we examine social phenomena and interactions, that they're always going to be impacted by this imbalance in power. And so part of the other goal of critical theory informed research is to be transformative and to address the inequality in power to try to make things more equal. No, I think sustainability is acknowledging that humans are not a benevolent force on the planet. Whether or not you think other things are benevolent or not, and you and I have had plenty of debates about this, I think it's also very silly to assume that everything else on Earth is living in perfect harmony and humans are the only problem. That also is not really how nature works. Nature isn't, to me, moralistic. It's things are just happening. But humans have a lot more free will and a lot more capability to organize and change the environment at a scale the other organisms cannot. So because we have that impact, we can recognize that we have that impact. I feel like we have a responsibility to not totally mess it up for everything else. But I don't think it's that humans are evil and everything else is great. That's just not very helpful, I think. But I think sustainability means acknowledging humans' impact on the environment and trying to limit the continued negative impact of that behavior, because really sustainability from a human point of view is fairly self-serving. It's that if humans want to keep living on the planet, we can't keep doing what we're doing. The planet will keep going. We can make ourselves go extinct and the Earth will still happen. It will be unfortunate if we take out a lot of other organisms with us on our way out, blowing up the world. We don't need to do that.